Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Brian Martin and Jillian Walker joining you today for our regular monthly webinar from the OnBoard CSM team. Today's topic is one I know a lot of you have shared that you're interested in doing. It's one we have touched on briefly before, but we're really excited to bring it to you again. We feel it's one of those topics it's always good to share and dig into a little bit. Getting your board to go all in with OnBoard. And we're going to talk today about overcoming some of those common objections from those holdouts in your organizations, maybe a little more resistant to adoption or wrapping their head around OnBoard. So glad you could join us. We did have we were hoping to have a couple of guests lined up today. Unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts, they weren't able to make it. So we really hope to have them back at a future conversation. But today, me and Jillian will do our best to keep you entertained and informed on this this great Tuesday afternoon. Hi, Jillian.
Hi, everybody.
So no time like the present to get started. Of course, on all of our OnBoard webinars, we have our tools here to help, the Q&A tool. If anybody has any questions, feel free to use the Q&A tool to reach out. Jillian's going to be monitoring those. We also have our chat windows open that you can share your thoughts with everyone. Feel free to use that as you need. Have a little over 50 attendees today, so that's fantastic. Thank you all for joining us. Some of you from the first time, I'm assuming. So we'll kind of dig in. So introducing, obviously, Jillian and myself today. Some of you may have known us. Jillian works mostly in the nonprofit and some other groups. Myself, I work with a lot of banks. So between the two of us, we have a pretty wide experience range with working with OnBoard personnel. And running into those, working that there are almost universally a handful of common objections that we run into from, as you might not be surprised, occasionally you get those particular resistant to change board members. And some common objectives that we hear quite often, or we hear from you, the administrators, or your leadership team. They get feedback from their board about, I just don't understand how that high-tech stuff works, or, honestly, just finding the stuff I want to read, it's easier in a paper packet. I just don't trust it. How do I know it's safe? I just don't have time to learn something new, or it's just easier for me to take notes on paper. I'm sure out there, you guys have all heard these phrases once or twice. If you haven't, fantastic. More power. It's sometimes you get easy. But realistically speaking, these are all common refrains that we hear with some of our more reluctant OnBoard users, or people that maybe take a little convincing to try something new. So we're going to kind of go over those one at a time, digging into common workarounds, ways to approach these conversations, and hopefully get those users from OnBoard resistors to OnBoard participants, get them all in on OnBoard. So I just don't know how that high-tech stuff works. Frankly, this is, I think, one of the easiest ones to refute. It's just common myth that board members or seasoned board members can't adopt new technology. I can remember, I have worked in a lot of different industries, and it is amazing to me how often I see, older family members that use FaceTime, they use smartphones because they realize there's a niche there. How often do we have a hard time connecting with our loved ones if they're on the other side of the country? The ability to have that personal connection on a smart device where somebody can actually see faces that you haven't seen in forever. That's a popular refrain. It's something that people adapt to. They carry a smartphone, whether it's to check the sports scores, they're checking the news, they're checking their bank accounts. They're using these technologies on a regular basis, even if they're unwilling to admit it, even to themselves sometimes. And frankly, there's, the fact that they don't understand how that high-tech stuff works doesn't mean they couldn't if they try. I know for a fact we have board members in their 80s that have adapted to OnBoard, that have used the solution, used the tools, and engaged with it very successfully. The trick is they need to see the value that adapting to these technology brings to them. It's not that they can't learn it, they just need to see the reason why they should be bothered to. And the phrasing on that's a little tough, but frankly, that's it. They just need to find out why it's worth their time and their trouble to learn that. And they just need to kind of be shown how this can save them that time that they would spend looking for stuff, reviewing documents. They can save that time in the meetings because they're able to read the book well in advance. If your meetings tend to drag, if your board members tend to be unengaged, show them that this OnBoard, that this opportunity exists, that they can review these materials well in advance of the meetings, come to the meetings more prepared, hopefully get out of there a little quicker. It's all about cost to benefit ratio. And they need to be shown that there is more of a benefit than the potential bother learning something new. Finding the stuff that they want to read is easier paper packet. You have those board members, they want that tactical feel. They want to flip through page by page and skim through the board packet easier. They think that's easier, but frankly, is it really? When somebody's just flipping through a paper packet with its dozens, if not hundreds of pages, how can they know that thumbing through it is really allowing them to review those details in particular, that they're finding what they're actually looking for? And OnBoard has built-in search tools, both on the organizational level in resources, or in the meeting level, in the actual to find topics in a book. So Jillian's going to show us a little bit on how that works, how they can scan through. So she's going to share her screen very shortly here. So it's just a moment while we get that set up. And
1 second.
We tested this out just a moment ago, so we know it works.
Maybe. It really did work a moment ago.
There we go. We are live.
Perfect.
So this screen you've seen before, hopefully, the dashboard screen. There's a couple of different search tools inside of OnBoard you can look through. We'll go into the meeting first. When you're in a book of OnBoard, you're looking at a board meeting book. Let's say there's a subject that you're looking to find in here. This one is a large book, maybe a couple hundred dozen pages. And here we go, incentives. These are all the instances of incentive discussion in the entire book. Now, this particular book is just for our demo environment. It's rather short, but if there were hundreds of pages, it's going to find every incident in order. And all you have to do is click on the one you're looking for, and it'll skip to that page and show you the highlighted incident or the incentives, the word right there for you to review.
And now we'll go to resources. So within resources, say I have a giant list. Some people have thousands of folders within documents. And so from here, again, if you know there's a specific document within all of this, without searching through, I know that I need to find information on wellness. And within all of those folders, it's going to take me directly to the document that has that word in its name, saving countless minutes searching through page by page. I'm going to turn it back over to Brian. Now.
Other topics on here, things that can help you. How often is your board members who have a paper packet, do they often, leave that behind? Especially, meetings that happened, a couple months back, maybe your organization meets once a quarter, and they're not carrying around the several hundred-page bulky book that they used in the past going forward. So OnBoard gives them the opportunity to keep all these resources, keep all these books on them in one, easy to transport device. Review old materials, not to mention, of course, the cost savings as opposed to paper packets and printing and binders, and the staff cost. Your teams have, you have an investment of time and energy of your administrative personnel putting together these board packets. How much better would their time be spent focusing on, instead of being copy binders, being actual productive parts of your organizations? It's all benefits of adopting this over. I think we have our first question.
Yeah, Leah asks, what about board members who don't want to bring a device to the meeting? We hear that a lot.
Okay, so that's a good question. My response to that would be, so if they don't want to bring a device, what do they want to bring? Do they want to bring a notepad? Were they bringing did they want a paper packet as for? Or are you saying you have a board member that just doesn't want to be bothered to come to the meeting prepared? That's a different conversation. And I think it's not unrealistic to raise those questions. Like, a device is not necessarily, we have there's a wide variety of devices you can use with OnBoard. Anything from a personal phone to an iPad to a regular laptop. They can review materials at home. If they have a home computer, even in this day and age, I don't know anybody who doesn't have a home computer. As long as they have a home computer, they can log in, review OnBoard. They don't need to use a mobile device for it. It's my personal opinion, it's a better experience on a mobile device, but you can certainly log in and access OnBoard from any computer using Chrome or Edge for web browsers. As long as they know their login and their password, they can access it from any device. And if they like the big monitor at home and they don't want to look on a small tablet or a small thing, they can do that and review that material remotely. If they don't want to bring that tablet with them to the meeting, again, I would question why do they not want to come to the meeting prepared? The conversation, you guys, you have an expectation, and you should have an expectation that your board members are going to have these materials reviewed. It's part of their job as board members, is to take the time to learn about the materials you're going over, to hopefully be prepared for these meetings in advance. And that's just part of the responsibility of being a board member. I don't think it's unrealistic to kind of stress that that's just part of the obligation. Now, if they find it's too bulky, or they don't want to mess with carrying that, like I said, there's any number of personal devices they can use instead. And I think that's, somebody's carrying a device that can access those materials in some way, whether it's a phone, whether it's a lightweight tablet, whether it's a full laptop. Hopefully that answers your question. And then moving on. Common objection is about trust. They don't trust new things. They don't trust new technology. They don't trust necessarily OnBoard because they don't know about it, and that's understandable. New things are, can be a little scary, but at the same time, you have to understand the board members has to trust the banks or the organization is making the right decision, and you've done as an organization your due diligence to trust that OnBoard has the security in place to keep this material safe. We as an organization understand what security is necessary. We have a lot of encryption. We are SOC 2 compliance. The Microsoft Azure cloud that we use It's the same cloud structure that the Department of Defense uses. So, I mean, if that cloud structure is good enough for the Department of Defense, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Navy, I would hope it's good enough for your organization as well. Maybe they don't, another way to look at this is maybe they don't trust themselves. Maybe they're worried that if they have this an electronic access to the board materials, how do they know they're not risking it or leaving it out there in some way? And then that's again where the onboard security comes into play. We know that the onboard login is going to be controlled. The password has to be done correctly so many times. There's encryption both while the data is at rest on their personal devices and while it's in transmit back and forth to the cloud environment. And it exists solely in that encrypted state. Your board members, if they're reviewing their packet on a mobile device, it's always going to be beyond that security wall. Even if they were to lose their devices, they leave them somewhere, onboard will require at the minimum PIN codes for them to log in and view materials. So even misplacing the device doesn't necessarily put that data at risk. And there's remote access. There's a number of different methods that can be used to remote wipe any mobile device. I don't care if it's an Android device, an iPhone, iPad, Windows tablet. Almost all those operating systems now have remote wipe capabilities from another device. So, Jillian, we have another question.
Actually, this wasn't a question. Someone got excited about this page on the deck. And so if anyone needs a copy or needs to be directed where to find this information, reach out to your CSM and we will get this to you today.
Yeah, just as a reminder, if your organization ever needs any due diligence, security follow-ups, copies of our SOC compliance, we do ask that you sign an NDA. But we can get that security. We have a trust center that we've built that gives access to all this information, and it can be given to anyone in your organization that has the right credentials and willing to sign an NDA. So we can get this materials through your CSM, Jillian, myself, one of our other wonderful CSMs, Dean, Jenny, Tim, etc. So reach out to your friendly CSM, any security, credentials, compliance information that you need, we can get that to you when you need it. And hopefully your board members will trust that you guys have done your work, verifying this information, that we have this available, and trust that you made the right decision as well. Okay, so on board, I don't have time to learn a new system. Maybe you guys have used email in the past. Maybe you've used a different portal, and they just don't want to be bothered learning something new. Change is they just don't have time for it. Even if they're familiar with an electronic device and they're not opposed to the idea, but they just don't want to bother with something new. OnBoard is designed to be as user-friendly as possible. We have an entire design team that's dedicated to making that onboard experience to be intuitive, to be easy to navigate, to be accessible for anyone, no matter their comfort range in an electronic environment or not. Technology is always going to change. We know your time is valuable. That's why we've made OnBoard as easy as it is. I personally have conducted user group trainings, end user director trainings that have taken less than 10 minutes. And we touched on every feature that they had access to within OnBoard. Plus we have the built-in tutorials within your OnBoard login. When they're viewing it on their personal device or on the computer, these tutorials are built in there. They can access them by just touching the little question button in the side menu, the blue navigation bar menu, and any topic in there that a end user would encounter, how to open a meeting, how to take notes, is covered in one of those step-by-step training tutorials. You can complete those in less than time than it takes to brew a cup or a pot of coffee. Cannot stress how useful those can be to aid your experience. And if your organization does want a little more hands-on training, reach out to your CSM team. Jillian, myself, Tim, Jenny, Dean, some of our new folks, Joe, Gabe, we're here to help. We can do one-on-one trainings with your end users, as simple as a phone call to them on a personal level, your board members. We're more than happy to engage directly with them, or a team training. 10 minutes before your next board meeting, if you just want a refresher, we can work and coordinate a time that works for you. If it's inside the scope of your board meeting, outside the scope of your board meeting, we can take that time, give them a refresher walkthrough, do a little Q&A for your board members, your end users. We're not here just to help you guys in the administration or your leadership teams in your organization. We're here to help everybody involved in the onboard process, including your board members. Do not be afraid to introduce them to us. Let them reach out to us personally for help. I know that's a scary concept. I understand board members are precious and we want to protect them like our children. And that's fine. But at the same time, if they want to learn these things, engaging directly with your CSM, we have the expertise needed to walk them delicately and friendly through the training process. We're there to help even them. So this is one we hear quite a bit too. They want the ability to take notes on paper, and that's fine. People, again, maybe they've used to using paper board books in the past, doesn't space long. They were used to carrying their own highlighter and highlighting the book. Maybe they have a pencil and they like to circle things or make notes inside the books. And there's nothing keeping you from doing that with OnBoard. So the OnBoard annotation tools are right there inside the solution. They can use a stylus. If you're using one of the new Apple devices, the iPencil is fantastic writing experience. I personally have used that, and it really does feel like you're writing on paper. The harder you push, the darker the line. There's a couple. It's very intuitive interface, just like you're writing there. Highlighters available through that. The Post-it note tool is available through that, where you can type in the notes if you're using a computer. But on the other hand, too, you can also use a paper notebook. How many times did your board members take notes on one of the old 250-page paper board books? And how many times did you ever see them log that board book again? They carried last month's to the next meeting? Of course they didn't. They made those notes. They looked at them for the course of the meeting. They shredded those notes, hopefully, or they kept them locked away at a safe or a binder and never looked at them again. At least with OnBoard, if you're using the annotation tools that are there, they'll be able to review them in the future at any time. If they're carrying a separate notebook and they take their notes there, they can bring that same notebook to each meeting going forward a lot easier than they could ever lug one of the old board books around. And that at least keeps all their notes. They can make a notation on the first. This is the notes I've taken for September's board meeting, April board, what have you, August's. But the annotation tools we have inside of OnBoard are pretty robust. Jillian is going to walk us through another demo of that. You want to let us see? Oh.
Only because I didn't have it teed up. That was a little unexpected.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
Happy to. Let's keep talking while I tee this up.
So she's gonna get that pulled up to demonstrate the annotations. Though I will mention this: if you didn't attend last month's webinar, that was actually the focus in the entire webinar, was the discussion of the annotation tools, how they can be utilized in your organization, how your users can use them. That would be the August webinar. If you want to go back and review that, feel free to go to our Passageways OnBoard channel or YouTube channel and view those, though. Perfect. So yeah, I threw Jillian under the bus and she was able to recover that quickly.
No worries.
She's Johnny on the spot.
This is how easy OnBoard is. You can just jump right in. So obviously I'm just in the calendar. I've opened up a meeting. I'm going to go into my board book and just pull up any page. And then you can see on the bottom right is the little icon that if I want to take a note. So in here, I can say, hello to the world, and that's going to save it. I can highlight anywhere I'd like. and then I can circle. So all of these things, and again, I'm just using a stylus, so it looks a little bit better than it probably would if I was using my finger. But that is how easy it is to take notes within the board book.
So yeah, switch the view. Back to our presentation. So yeah, touching base on that, annotation tool, very simple, very easy to use. Again, if your board members need a little training on that, a walkthrough, we're more than happy to do that. You can show them August's webinar or a view of the September one that we have here. We've gone in there. I think there's a couple questions in the chat window that have popped up.
Well, there is one from Karen, and this is a common question. What about someone who does not want another password? Well, and this comes back to the beauty of technology, right? So if we're using an Android or iOS system, specifically talking about the end user and the board member, that I'm going to talk about the iPhone specifically, that it will save passwords. It will use biometrics. It can use face recognition if you have that level. It can use a thumbprint or a fingerprint. And so while I completely understand I don't want to save another password, I probably recycle the same 5 over the course of a few years. But I know that I want a heavy encryption on my app, on my phone, and so I use biometrics. And so there are lots of things that phones will, and computers as well, will save those passwords for you. So I never want to say push back too hard on a board member, but push back on your board member a bit, Karen, and just try to explain the technology is their friend, and that biometrics and thumbprints and letting your system save that password so they don't have to think of it just makes all of our lives a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. I mean, the devices that we carry have the ability to make the life a little bit easier on it, and coming at it as a point of frustration is all you have to kind of turn that around and make that an opportunity. Be like, well, listen, Mr. Board Member, I understand that knowing another password is frustrating. OnBoard does give you the ability to create your own password. You as the administrator assign them a temporary one-use password, but then they can turn around and create their own. If they want to use a variation on passwords they use in other devices, not necessarily best practice, but they certainly can do that. But yeah, the ability to do fingerprint logins, FaceTime or the face scanning ones, the new biometrics that they have, all give you the ability to log in without having to go through those extra steps of remembering a significantly long password. We did a security review with Ross, our resident security expert, a little while back, talking about some of the strengths of different passwords, the use of two-factor authentication. That was a great webinar. I want to say it was back in early spring, and we did a great topic on that in an earlier webinar. Again, on our YouTube channel, feel free to check that out. So there's good. Barbara has a question. What about those who want to use their smartphones, but they can't see the documents well enough? Any suggestions to help them? So with the smartphones, there's a pinch and zoom function that is supported by OnBoard in most smartphone devices, whether it's the iPad, whether it's the Android. And basically, very simply, they use 2 fingers and they can zoom in and out. Now, some smartphones have a lot more real estate than others. Some screens are going to be a lot bigger than others. Obviously, the larger the screen, the easier that experience is going to be for legibility. Rotating the screen to give it more room in the landscape view, it can certainly help. And again, the pinch and zoom to zoom in, zoom out can make that a lot easier. There's also the button that allows you to expand the actual book to full screen view. In fact, I think I can, yeah, so not in that screenshot. Yeah, so actually it's right up there at the top. Those the different view buttons on the screenshot that we have there. You can control a little bit on how that shows up by clicking those 4 blue dots. If you see that in the middle of the screenshot there, I wish we had. I didn't think we need that too much, but that would be a good example. Let's see, any other, I think that covers it. Anybody else, feel free to use the question and answer tool. We're at about half hour into our presentation today, so we do have plenty of time. I think primarily adoption by reluctant users comes from within, from the top down. When you have, I've worked with boards in the past, and actually I can share one story because he was with in a previous webinar with us, Peter at Dryden Mutual. In the insurance industry, Peter shared, it's a conservative industry with people that are not necessarily super used to change. And he had real concerns with how OnBoard was going to be received, how that change from traditional paperboard packets was going to be taken by the board. He was pleasantly surprised to find that they were not only willing to try something different, they were pleasantly eager to do so because they realized the capabilities that was there without having to mess with the paper, without having to worry about getting mailed packets to them, and their adoption went a lot smoother than I think even he thought. But frankly, he was new to the leadership in the organization, and he saw the need for this change. And I think when you have leadership driving that decision and involved in the choices of rolling out a successful, change like that to the board, it comes a long way. So if you're an organization that's dealing with leadership that's maybe not as willing to change, or that can be a bit of a struggle, in which case you really want to look closely at your CSM, kind of work with them on best practices, because we can help you instill the value and show that how it's going to help best perform in your organization. Can it be a struggle? Absolutely. And we sympathize. We work with organizations all the time that can have that, but it's nothing that hasn't been overcome in the past with very similar organizations to yours. So if you feel you're alone in the world, I assure you, you're not. Everybody can embrace and be taught how to use this platform. Let's see. Alyssa has a question, a little bit unrelated. Yeah, it's a little bit of a side question. What's the difference between creator role and an admin role? General administrative type question, good question. Creator role is a little bit like an admin light. An admin has the ability to not only create content inside your instance of OnBoard, but control organizational settings, invite new users, change your security settings, etc. A creator has none of that ability. A creator can create new content. They can create a new meeting. They can create a new approval if you have those features. They can create a new resource folder and add documents to it and share that with others. But they have no ability to create new users. They have no ability to change your organizational settings. They have no ability to change your security settings. So hopefully that answers your question, Elisa. It seems very similar, but there's a lot of differences on the back end.
Wonderful.
It does things. Okay, great. So, and I'm looking in the Q&A section to see if there's anything else. Well, I think if there's no other questions, we can leave it off. Jillian, do you have any final thoughts to share with our people joining us today?
Well, I really liked how you said it comes from the top down. So while I have a few other verticals and try to focus on other industries as well, I really do mainly focus on not-for-profits. And we can know in not-for-profits that we feel the board relationship sometimes is a bit different than, say, in finance or in healthcare. Not-for-profits, we very much rely on our board members. And I understand that a lot of times we want to cater to those board members, and we're very grateful for their time and they're volunteering that time. but it still comes down to that top-down mentality. And so there are a lot of boards that have really encouraged gently and pushed through a lot of these roadblocks to get their board more engaged. They've gotten younger board members more engaged because we know younger people really adapt to technology quicker. So it's helped with retention and it's helped with recruitment. So I think this is really, really wonderful if you can push back a little bit more to your board with still being grateful for their time. Again, specifically in the not-for-profit space. But that's the biggest thing. It's got to be top down. You have to push back a little bit and hold some hands and tell them that it's going to be okay, but that technology is their friend, and OnBoard can really save a lot of time and money. So I hope you took a little bit of something away today from our quick webinar. And if you have more questions, please feel free to reach out to your CSMs. We're here to help and to answer any questions that you have. And our job is to make it successful for you.
Hey, before we go, I want to just kind of let you guys know about next month's webinar topic. On October 15th, Tim and Dean, if he doesn't find a way to sneak out of it, are going to be hosting our next webinar, a feature focus, effective use of the announcements tool and the dashboards. They're going to dig into those two functions. They're closely related to each other. Some announcements are available to everybody, every user of OnBoard. Well, every organizational person has the ability to use announcements, and dashboards is open to our enterprise and collaboration suite subscribers. The ability to create that custom dashboard landing page is real popular but frequently underutilized. So we're going to dig in a little bit on some best practices with those, tips and tricks, etc. Really excited about that. And again, want to thank you all for joining us. We'll leave the broadcast open just for a moment or two after this, but Jillian, myself, I want to thank everybody for joining. If you have questions, if you'd like to do some follow-up discussions, if you have a really successful story about a board member that maybe wasn't really willing to give OnBoard a shot, and then you were able to sway them over, and you want to share that with your CSM. We learn best practices from you. We learn the success stories from you guys. So anybody out there that has one of those that wins that they're really happy about and they're comfortable sharing with the team, please reach out to us, have the conversation, and we want to share your successes as well as our own. So great, guys. I'm going want to thank you all for attending, and I look forward to speaking with you all again. Have a great rest of your September.
Bye, everyone.